Okay, so we're diving into the Kama Sutra.
Yeah.
You sent over some translated excerpts,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to admit,
Sure.
I'm really curious
Yeah.
to see what we uncover here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating text.
We're going beyond the typical assumptions.
Right.
And believe me, there are
Mhm.
plenty
Mhm.
to see what this book really reveals about ancient Indian society.
It offers a really unique window into a world
As a whole.
that had very different values
Yeah,
and social structures
exactly.
than our own.
And the text itself
Yeah.
jumps right into this idea of balance.
Mhm.
It lays out the importance of dharma, artha, and kama,
Right.
virtue, wealth, and pleasure as the trifecta for a fulfilling life.
Vatsayana,
Yeah,
the author,
yeah.
clearly believed that a life well lived
Mm.
required attention to all three. It wasn't enough to simply be wealthy or indulge in pleasure.
Right.
You had to live a virtuous life as well.
It makes you wonder how these concepts played out in everyday life.
Yeah.
Was everyone striving for this balance?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it more of an ideal?
It's hard to say for certain, of course.
Yeah.
But we do get some clues from the text itself.
Okay.
For example, the Kama Sutra outlines 64 arts
Okay.
that were considered essential for personal development.
Wow, 64.
These range from singing and dancing
Okay.
to sword fighting and carpentry.
That's quite a list.
It is.
And it wasn't just for men, right?
Absolutely.
The text mentions women being educated in these arts as well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty remarkable for the time period.
Yeah.
It suggests that ancient Indian society,
Okay.
at least as depicted in the Kama Sutra,
Mm.
valued well-rounded individuals regardless of gender.
Interesting.
It wasn't just about preparing for a specific role in society,
Right.
but about cultivating a diverse set of skills and knowledge.
Okay, so we have this emphasis on balance, dharma, artha, kama, and a surprisingly comprehensive approach to education.
Right.
What else can we glean about the values and social norms of this time?
Well, the Kama Sutra also provides glimpses
Okay.
into the social life of ancient India.
Mm-hmm.
We see descriptions of festivals, drinking parties, picnics, even cockfights.
Wow.
Vatsayana paints a picture of a society
Yeah.
that enjoyed leisure and social gatherings.
It's like getting a peek into their daily lives. It
Yeah.
makes me wonder, were these social events purely for pleasure?
That's a great question.
Or did they serve a deeper purpose?
It's likely they serve multiple functions.
Okay.
Social gatherings were opportunities to build relationships,
Okay.
strengthen community bonds, and perhaps even conduct business
Right.
or discuss politics.
So even their leisure activities had layers of meaning and purpose.
Right.
It wasn't just about letting loose.
It's about cultivating a fulfilling life
Yeah.
in all its aspects.
Exactly.
And speaking of relationships, that's where the Kama Sutra really gets interesting.
Okay.
It delves into the nuances of attraction, compatibility,
Yeah.
and different types of lovers.
Okay, this is where I have to admit, my curiosity is piqued.
Okay.
Tell me more about these categories.
Well, for example, there's the deer woman,
Okay.
known for her grace and slenderness,
Mm.
and the elephant woman,
Okay.
described as having a more robust physique.
So it's not just about looks?
These descriptions go beyond mere physical attributes,
Yeah.
reflecting ideals of beauty and temperament.
There's a deeper meaning behind these labels.
Absolutely.
Okay.
These categories reveal a lot
Yeah.
about the values and preferences of that era.
Mm-hmm.
The deer woman, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
might have been seen as embodying qualities of elegance and refinement,
Okay.
while the elephant woman could have been associated with strength and sensuality.
It's like a personality guide
It's very much like that.
for ancient Indian dating.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, how did these categories influence how people interacted with each other?
It's a fascinating question.
Did they determine who was considered a desirable partner?
And one that the text doesn't explicitly answer,
Right.
but it's safe to say that these categories likely played a role
Okay.
in shaping perceptions
Mm-hmm.
of attractiveness and compatibility.
It makes you think about how much our own perceptions of beauty and desirability are shaped by cultural norms.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that what's considered attractive in one culture or time period
Right.
might be viewed differently in another.
Precisely.
And speaking of cultural norms, the Kama Sutra doesn't shy away from discussing some of the more controversial aspects of ancient Indian society, including the practice of seducing another person's spouse.
That definitely raises some eyebrows.
That definitely raises some eyebrows from a modern day perspective.
From a modern-day perspective, yes.
But as you've mentioned before,
Right.
it's important to view these practices within their historical and social context.
Absolutely. We can't impose our own moral judgments on a culture
Right.
that existed centuries ago.
Yeah.
What's important is to understand how these practices fit into the broader social landscape of the time.
So what does the text tell us about this particular practice? So was it widely accepted?
The Kama Sutra acknowledges that such liaisons existed,
Okay.
but it also highlights the risks involved. It warns of potential social censure and even physical harm.
So it wasn't presented as a consequence-free behavior?
No.
It sounds like there was a level of awareness regarding the potential for drama and fallout.
Yes, and it's important to remember that we're talking about a society
Right.
with different power structures and social hierarchies than our own.
Right.
The consequences of these actions likely varied depending on one's social standing
Yeah.
and the specific circumstances involved.
It's like a complicated dance of power, desire, and social norms.
Yes.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
Everything in the Kama Sutra seems to have layers of meaning and complexity.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's not a simplistic text by any means.
Right.
It offers a nuanced look at a society that was grappling with issues of love, desire, and morality.
Yeah.
Much like we are today.
And speaking of complexity, the Kama Sutra also delves into the world of courtesans,
It did.
who seem to have played a fascinating and multifaceted role in ancient Indian society.
Courtesans were often highly educated,
Yeah.
skilled in the arts, and wielded considerable power and influence.
It seems like they were much more than just objects of pleasure.
The Kama Sutra offers a glimpse into their lives, their strategies for attracting and managing lovers,
Right.
and the economics of desire in that era.
They were entrepreneurs, artists,
Yes,
and even influencers in their own right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They challenged traditional gender roles and carved out a unique space for themselves
Yeah.
within a patriarchal society.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Okay.
Tell me more about their lives and how they navigated this complex social landscape.
Well, for starters, the Kama Sutra highlights the importance of education and skill.
Okay.
For courtesans, it advises them to be proficient in the 64 arts.
So they were expected to be well-rounded and accomplished individuals.
Just as men were encouraged to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not just beautiful,
Right.
but intelligent and talented as well.
Exactly. And this is where we see a significant difference between how courtesans were perceived in ancient India versus other cultures.
Okay.
They were not simply seen as objects of pleasure,
Right.
but as intelligent and sophisticated women
Yeah.
who could hold their own in intellectual and artistic circle.
It sounds like they were running their own businesses, managing clients, and navigating a complex social landscape.
Right.
The Kama Sutra even outlines strategies for them to attract and retain wealthy patrons. Yes. Which sounds a lot like modern-day marketing and relationship management.
It does. They were entrepreneurs of desire, so to speak.
Yeah.
And their success depended not just on their physical beauty, but on their wit, their social skills,
Right.
and their ability to provide companionship and entertainment.
It's like they were running their own personal brand.
It is.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And speaking of managing clients, the Kama Sutra gets surprisingly specific about the financial aspect of these relationships.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It advises courtesans on how to negotiate for their services,
Okay.
how to increase their earnings, and even how to invest their wealth.
Wow.
There's a whole section on the art of getting money from lovers,
Okay.
both through natural means and through more, say, strategic approaches.
Like pretending to have had your jewelry stolen. Or creating a sense of competition between lovers.
Exactly.
Almost Machiavellian.
It does reveal a shrewd understanding of human psychology and the dynamics of power in relationships.
Yeah.
And it paints a picture of courtesans as savvy businesswomen.
Right.
Not just passive recipients of male attention.
Which again challenges our preconceived notions about women's roles in ancient societies. They were active participants in the economy and in shaping their own destinies.
Absolutely.
This is all incredibly intriguing.
It is. And there's so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
But for now, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll delve deeper into the world of courtesans and explore some of the more magical elements of the Kama Sutra.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so let's jump back into the Kama Sutra.
Okay.
And explore those magical elements you mentioned.
Yeah.
I have to admit, that's the part that really caught my attention.
Yeah, me too. It's like, we've been talking about this ancient text as a guide to life, relationships, even business, and then suddenly, boom, love potions.
Yeah.
It feels almost like whiplash.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition, isn't it?
Yeah.
On one hand, we have this very practical advice about social etiquette and navigating relationships. And then on the other, we have these almost mystical elements, like spells and recipes for attracting lovers.
Yeah. So how do we reconcile those two sides of the Kama Sutra? Was it just a reflection of the beliefs and superstitions of the time?
I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
Remember, we're talking about a time when the lines between science, religion, and magic were much blurrier than they are today.
Yeah.
What we might consider superstition was often seen as a legitimate way to influence the world.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it makes those magical elements even more intriguing, doesn't it?
It does.
It's like a window into how people viewed the world and their place within it.
Exactly. And even if we don't take those potions and spells literally, they still reveal something about human desires and motivations. The desire to control love, to attract a specific person, to make someone fall head over heels for you.
Yeah.
These are universal desires that transcend time and culture.
It's like no matter how much society changes, some things just stay the same. We still see those desires reflected in our modern-day fascination with love spells, horoscopes, and even dating apps in a way.
Absolutely. And the Kama Sutra's approach to these desires is actually quite nuanced.
Okay.
It's not just about following a recipe or casting a spell. There's a strong emphasis on the inner state of the person using these practices.
So it's not just about the external actions, but about your internal mindset and intentions as well.
Precisely. The Kama Sutra suggests that the effectiveness of these practices depends on the intention and inner state of the person using them.
Okay.
It's about aligning your energy with the desired outcome, not just going through the motions.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like if you're not genuinely invested in the outcome, then even the most powerful love potion won't work.
Exactly. And that aligns with the broader philosophy of the Kama Sutra, which emphasizes self-awareness, mindfulness, and understanding the nature of desire.
It's about taking responsibility for your own desires and actions, rather than relying on external forces to make things happen.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a valuable lesson to carry with us, even in our modern lives.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in quick fixes and external solutions. But real change and fulfillment come from within.
Okay, so we've talked about the magical elements, but there's another aspect of the Kama Sutra that I want to circle back to. The section on seducing another person's spouse. It's a topic that we touched on earlier, but I think it warrants further exploration.
I agree. It's definitely a controversial topic, one that requires careful consideration.
Especially since we've been talking about the Kama Sutra's emphasis on virtue and morality. How do we reconcile those values with the advice on engaging in extramarital affairs?
It's a complex issue.
All right.
And one that the Kama Sutra itself doesn't shy away from.
Yeah.
Well, the text acknowledges that such liaisons existed. It also outlines the risks and consequences involved, including the potential for social censure and even physical harm.
So it's not like it's presented as a completely acceptable or risk-free behavior.
Not at all. It's more like the text is acknowledging the realities of human behavior and the complexities of relationships. It's not condoning these actions, but it's also not ignoring them.
And it's important to remember the historical and social context, right? The concept of marriage and fidelity may have been viewed differently in ancient India.
Precisely. We can't impose our own modern-day morality on a culture that existed centuries ago. What's important is to understand how these practices fit within the societal norms and power structures of that era.
And speaking of power structures, I'm curious about the role of women in these situations. Were they always just passive victims?
That's a great question.
Or did they have any agency in these matters?
And the Kama Sutra actually suggests that women were not always powerless. It describes how they could use their intelligence, charm, and even their sexuality to manipulate situations to their advantage.
So it wasn't always a clear-cut case of men taking advantage of women. It sounds like there were shades of gray, and women could exert their own influence, even within a patriarchal system.
Exactly. And while we might not agree with the ethics of these actions, it's fascinating to see how women, even within a patriarchal system, found ways to exert agency and pursue their own desires.
It challenges our assumptions about the past, doesn't it?
It does.
It reminds us that history is often more complex and nuanced than we might initially assume.
And speaking of challenging assumptions,
Yeah.
let's talk about the king's harem.
Okay.
Which the Kama Sutra devotes a significant portion to.
The harem. Now, that's definitely a topic that sparks the imagination.
Yeah.
What insights did the Kama Sutra offer?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that the harem wasn't just a place of pleasure.
Okay.
It was also a political institution, and the women within it held varying degrees of power and influence.
So not all the women were equal in status?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
There was a clear hierarchy with the king's wives at the top, followed by concubines, and then female attendants who served various roles.
And the text goes into detail about how each of these women should behave.
It does.
Okay.
There are sections on the duties of a wife, how to manage a household, how to interact with the king and his other wives, and even how to gain favor and advancement within the harem.
So it's almost like a guide to navigating court politics.
It is very much that.
As much as it is about romance, it sounds like a real-life soap opera.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it reminds us that even within seemingly restrictive environments, human beings find ways to carve out their own paths and pursue their own desires.
It's like regardless of the circumstances, people will always find ways to create drama and intrigue. But beyond the drama, I'm curious about how the women in the harem are portrayed in the text. Are they presented as passive figures? Or do they exhibit agency and individuality?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the text presents a somewhat contradictory view of the women in the harem. On the one hand, it upholds the traditional patriarchal structure, where the king is the ultimate authority figure. But on the other hand, it also reveals glimpses of female agency and cunning.
So it's not a completely one-sided portrayal.
No.
It sounds like the women are shown as having their own motivations and strategies.
Exactly.
Even within the confines of the harem.
The Kama Sutra advises women on how to manipulate situations to their advantage, how to gain the king's favor, and even how to outmaneuver their rivals within the harem.
It's like they were playing a high-stakes game of chess.
It's very much like that.
Using their intelligence and social skills to navigate the complexities of harem life.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the Kama Sutra so fascinating.
Yeah.
It doesn't offer simplistic answers or paint a black and white picture of the past. Instead, it reveals the complexities of human relationships and the ways in which people, regardless of their social standing, sought to find love, pleasure, and fulfillment within the constraints of their time.
It's a reminder that history is full of complicated characters and morally ambiguous situations.
Very true.
Nothing is ever black and white.
And that's what makes diving into sources like the Kama Sutra so rewarding.
Yeah.
It challenges our perspectives and reveals the hidden stories of those who often go unheard.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the philosophy of Dharma, Artha, and Kama, to the social lives of ancient Indians, to the complexities of courtesan culture, and the intricacies of the harem. The Kama Sutra has certainly given us a lot to ponder.
It certainly has. And before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what surprised you the most, or what insights resonated with you the most.
Well, one thing that really struck me was the emphasis on understanding and catering to your partner's needs. It's not just about satisfying your own desires, but about creating a shared experience of pleasure and connection.
That's an excellent observation.
That really resonated with me.
It speaks to the importance of communication and empathy in any relationship.
Yeah.
Whether romantic or otherwise.
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own wants and needs. But the Kama Sutra reminds us that true fulfillment often comes from connecting with others on a deeper level.
And it's something that's so often overlooked, especially in our modern world of instant gratification and fleeting connections.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking about relationships as transactions. But the Kama Sutra encourages us to approach them with more intention and mindfulness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not a passive activity. It's an active process of learning, growing, and creating something meaningful together.
Right.
And that takes effort, understanding, and a willingness to step outside of our own egocentric perspectives.
Another thing that surprised me was how the Kama Sutra blends practicality with what we might call spirituality or even psychology. It's not just a how-to guide. It's almost a philosophy of life.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
We see this in the emphasis on self-awareness. The importance of cultivating a magnetic personality. And even in the sections on the magical elements. It's not just about external actions, but about aligning your inner self with your desired outcomes.
Right. And that brings up a question that I've been wondering about.
Sure.
The Kama Sutra was written centuries ago in a very different cultural context. How much of it is actually relevant to modern relationships?
That's a question a lot of people have. And I think the answer is it depends. Certainly, some of the specific practices and advice are outdated. Or even problematic from a modern perspective.
But the advice on seducing another person's spouse, we definitely wouldn't endorse that today.
Of course not.
But I think the underlying principles of the Kama Sutra, the emphasis on self-awareness, communication, empathy, and understanding the nature of desire are timeless and universally relevant. It's like we can take those principles and apply them to our own lives and relationships in a way that feels authentic and meaningful to us. We don't have to follow the specific instructions to the letter, but we can learn from the wisdom that the Kama Sutra offers.
Exactly. It's about adapting those principles to our own modern context. For example, the Kama Sutra's advice on cultivating a magnetic personality might translate to developing strong communication skills, being a good listener, and cultivating a genuine interest in others.
That makes sense. It's about taking the essence of those teachings and finding ways to express them in a way that aligns with our own values and beliefs.
Precisely. And I think that's what makes the Kama Sutra so fascinating to study. It offers a window into a different time and culture. But it also speaks to universal human experiences and desires that are still relevant today.
Okay. I think it's time to open it up to our listeners.
Okay.
We've got some great questions coming in, and I'm eager to hear your thoughts on them.
I'm ready.
All right. The first question comes from Sarah, who asks, given its focus on pleasure and sexuality, was the Kama Sutra considered taboo or controversial in ancient India?
That's a great question, Sarah.
Yeah.
It's easy to assume that a book like the Kama Sutra would have been seen as scandalous or even forbidden. But the reality is a bit more nuanced.
It wasn't like they were hiding it under the mattress or anything.
Not exactly.
Okay.
The Kama Sutra wasn't necessarily hidden away or forbidden. It was part of a larger body of knowledge that included texts on various subjects like politics, warfare, and economics.
So it's just one piece of the puzzle. Not some shocking outlier.
And remember, ancient Indian society had a more open and accepting attitude towards sexuality than many cultures do today.
Interesting.
Kama, or pleasure, was seen as one of the essential pursuits in life, alongside Dharma and Artha. It was all about balance.
So it wasn't universally embraced, but it wasn't necessarily shunned either. It was just part of the tapestry of ancient Indian thought.
Exactly. And it's important to note that even within the Kama Sutra itself, there are discussions and debates about the ethics of certain practices. Like we talked about earlier with seducing someone else's spouse.
So it wasn't just a free-for-all. They were grappling with complex moral questions, just like we do today.
Absolutely. And that's what makes studying the Kama Sutra so fascinating. It offers a glimpse into a culture that was both similar to and very different from our own. And it raises questions that continue to be relevant today.
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
Okay.
This one comes from David, who asks, what is the most important takeaway from the Kama Sutra for people in modern relationships?
That's a great question, David.
Yeah.
If I had to choose just one, I'd say it's the emphasis on mindfulness and intention in relationships.
Okay.
The Kama Sutra encourages us to be aware of our own desires and needs, but also to be attentive to those of our partners.
Like we were talking about earlier, it's about creating a shared experience,
right?
Not just pursuing individual gratification. It's about taking the time to truly understand and connect with your partner on a deeper level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that takes effort.
Right.
Communication and a willingness to be present and engaged in the relationship.
Yeah.
It's not always easy.
Right.
But the rewards are well worth it.
Well said. And I think that's a great note to end on.
Okay.
The Kama Sutra, despite its often misunderstood reputation, offers a timeless message about the importance of living a conscious and connected life.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that relationships and all their complexities and challenges are ultimately about connection, understanding, and the pursuit of shared happiness.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And while we may not agree with or choose to practice all of its teachings, the Kama Sutra continues to spark curiosity, challenge assumptions, and remind us of the enduring power of human desire and the complexities of love and relationships.
So as you continue exploring the world around you, remember to approach it with curiosity, an open mind, and a willingness to dive deep beneath the surface. You never know what hidden treasures you might uncover.
Right.
Until next time, keep diving.